Hi, I'm Eric Johnson, and I'm here today with Patty Morrison. Patty is the CIO of Cardinal Health, and she's here as part of our Vanderbilt Health Care Conference. Really great to have you here today, Patty.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Well, you've been talking a little bit today about data and digital officers, digital's, part of the business. What does that mean for CIOs and the CIO role? Is that changing?
Oh my gosh. Let's see, I've been a CIO for 20 plus years, and it's completely changed. It used to be the CIO was automating the back office and running huge operations, and that's still the case. But today, CIOs have to be more customer facing. So much of the world is moving where IT is the business that you're in the middle of that. So it's completely changed the work that CIOs do.
And will CIO role maintain or become a separate role from kind of a chief digital officer?
Well, whenever there's new introduction of capability, people toy with creating, when e-commerce was introduced, e-commerce would create different departments from the brick and mortars, and now they're coming back together because they share common bonds. And digital officers make sense in some companies, and in other companies they don't. I have some personal philosophies that I think everybody in the company needs to be digital, and that's not just belonging to one function. And part of my role is that education of all the functions in the company and the work they have to do with digital. So I don't get all wrapped up in the titles, I just do the work that I think needs to get done, and a lot of that is creating the digital capability in the company.
That's great. Well, you were talking today a little bit about entrepreneurship, this innovating within the organization. How does Cardinal Health do that?
Well, it's hard in large companies, right? Sometimes because you actually have so many different, silos that are there for a reason, because that's how you've been structured or how you manage your organization. So when you do entrepreneurship, it's really important to be cross-functional. And so we actually went off the reservation. We moved a whole group into a separate building. We took out all the functional barriers. So we have oncology nurses and pharmacists. We have anthropologists. We have digital thinking people, design thinking people. We have Java coders. We have kind of this mix. And I think that getting that kind of cross-functional group and getting out of the kind of the mothership creates some ability to break some rules. And so I think the other really important thing in creating entrepreneurship is the interaction with customers. You have to have real problems to solve, and they don't necessarily always have to be complex problems. They can just be problems. And so when that group of multifaceted people in a really cool working environment interacts with a customer to go after a problem, and they jointly develop solutions, it's really powerful. And that's, I think, where the innovation comes from. And we've been able to do that. We actually call it Fuse at Cardinal Health, and anybody's welcome to come see.
So is that kind of thinking, that entrepreneurial thinking, what does that mean for MBA students and business students?
Well, I think it means a lot because, everyone can dream to be the Silicon Valley entrepreneur that builds Facebook, while they're at school, like Mark Zuckerberg did. But, the reality is that, really you go back to the core skill base of problem solving. How do you diagnose a problem? How do you break it down? How do you then build solutions in these multifaceted environments? You have to know how to work in a team. You have to understand and value the multidisciplines. I happen to believe that technology and analytics is a really important foundational skill base, so I think MBA students need to understand that, so that a lot of the solutions that come into the world today do have a technology component to it. And don't take for granted that when that your cell phone works every day, but do you know how it works every day, right? So I think that you really have to be able to get in and understand how things really work, get that problem-solving skill underway. So it's important, very important for MBA students.
So then the last couple of years, information security has become really a front and center issue in healthcare. I think everywhere, but healthcare in particular. And in that kind of innovative environment, how do you protect intellectual property?
Yeah, it's really important, and particularly since we're innovating in healthcare, we also have regulatory requirements. So what's a medical device? What isn't a medical device is quite unclear when it comes to healthcare IT, for example. There's some gray borders there. So we have to think about the protection of the IP. One is knowing where the data is. Is it sitting on a paper in somebody's desk drawer? Is it actually automated? You know, believe it or not, a lot of things aren't automated in the product lifecycle management. You know, we have to build even security in the physical space. You need a retinal scanner to get into Fuse, right?
Wow.
You know, so I mean, we
Wow.
do a lot, probably more even in physical security. But it's always about identifying the data that's the most important to protect.
Those crown jewels.
Exactly, and putting the walls around that, because you can't protect all of it, and you have to monitor it all the time. The other thing in healthcare IT, when you're building software, we actually use tools to ensure that we're building the security into the product itself. So as we're doing the coding, we actually check for the quality of our code very early, so that you're not catching the
It's
problems.
not a bolt-on later.
Exactly, it's not downstream. You're actually building it into the product itself.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I always love to ask executives is a little bit about their leadership journey, and maybe a lesson you'd want to share.
Sure, leadership. Oh gosh, I think probably the biggest lesson, and it's something when I interview, you know, students and anybody who I'm interviewing, I always look for is resilience. You know, how do you bounce back from problems and setbacks, and how do you deal with failure? And you know, if you can't articulate things that obstacles you run into, and I think in my career, whether personal or professional, you know, I've had a very successful career, and people look at it and go, wow, well, you made it, you got to your career goal. But it wasn't easy, you know, and I've had my job eliminated, you know, I've been in companies that have had upturns and downturns. I've had personal, you know, challenges, you know, and I've raised kids and had to do all that kind of stuff. So you just have to have that resilience along the way. And I think it's made me think optimistically about every obstacle I've ever run into, to think about what's possible. It's another turn. How do you adjust and pivot and go around it? In healthcare, oh my gosh, every time we have to pivot when somebody throws a curveball at us, it's really important. Yeah. So that's something that I've experienced along the way.
That's a great one. And of course, here in Nashville, we think about Taylor Swift and shake it off. It sounds like you're saying shake it off, move on.
Move on. I mean, you know, with every window that's closed or doors opened or vice versa, right? You know, I kind of tend to think that way, you know, about what's next and what's possible. And that's always been a really important part of how I've led teams and how I've thought about my own career.
That's great. Well, Patty, thanks so much for spending the day with us at the Vanderbilt Health Care Conference.
It was really enjoyable. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.